Hi, I'm Dore, reporter for Channel 17. I cover a range of things in Kern County, from government to crime to a signature issue here at 17 News, pedestrian safety. In 2023 and 2024, 117 people have lost their lives on Kern streets and railroads. And now we are having local experts give their take on how and why these things happen. Joining me for this pedestrian fatality roundtable, Highway Patrol Officer Jorge Toro, local civil attorney Matt Clark with Cohn Clark, and Ward 4 Bakersfield City Councilmember Bob Smith, who is also on the city's Multimodal Transportation Committee. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on. How are you guys doing today?
Good,
doing great.
Thank you for having us.
For sure. Officer Toro, for some background, I'm going to start with you, some few questions. How long have you been an officer with Highway Patrol?
9 years.
9 years. And have you been to pedestrian fatality calls?
I have. I've been to calls assisting fellow officers and also as a prime investigator.
Gotcha. And what are some similarities across all the cases that you've seen?
So with a lot of our pedestrian versus vehicle fatalities, what we're seeing is the pedestrians a lot of the times are at fault for, number one, failure to yield the right-of-way to a car. Maybe they're wearing darker clothing, they're in an area where it's not well lit. That's probably some of the similarities.
Gotcha. And Matt, with some of your background, has your firm represented people with personal injury or wrongful death cases regarding pedestrian fatalities?
Yeah, more than I can remember, Connor.
Mm-hmm. And what are the main issues when it comes to pedestrian fatalities that you've seen? Is it lighting? Is it streets?
Well, every case is different. And so in some instances, yes, of course it's lighting. In some instances, yes, it's a pedestrian in the right-of-way of where a vehicle should be. In other instances, it's distracted driving, driving above the speed limit, not following the rules of the road. Impaired driving is certainly an issue in our community. And so we see cases that result from all of those things. So there's really no one factor that I can say is the cause behind what we see as a large number of pedestrian fatalities in our community.
Yeah, and that's why we're doing this today, to kind of touch on all of them. And now to Councilmember Smith, can you talk a little bit about the Multimodal Transportation Committee? What does it seek to do, and what is it doing now?
Well, we want to make the streets safer for everybody in Bakersfield, and so, you know, as he said, there's many different ways, and what we focus on is the engineering. How are the streets really made? What encourages people to drive slower, to drive safer, to pay attention? What encourages pedestrians to be safer? And so engineering-wise, how can we make the streets safer? And also enforcement, to encourage the police to, you know, be out there and slow people down and get pedestrians to follow the rules, all of the above.
And I know that the committee came to form around last year, and the traffic calming plan came out of that as well. So how did that traffic calming plan come up?
Well, we've been working on it for years. I mean, I've been on the city council for 13 years now, and the major complaint I always get is people drive too damn fast. You know, people want slower traffic in their neighborhoods, out on the streets, and so previously the idea of engineering for streets was make them big and wide and straight, and that leaves room for forgiveness for people. Well, really what it does is it encourages people to go fast. And so different concepts now around engineering streets, and whether it be roundabouts or speed humps or narrower streets, different ways to make people pay attention and to slow down and drive safer.
And now I'm going to turn to some general questions for the group. Feel free to jump in at any time. I want to talk about street lighting. 91 of these deaths in 2023 and 24 happened at night. How can street lighting affect what a driver and a pedestrian do in terms of rules of the road?
Well, you're looking at me, Connor. Okay, so first of all, I'm not sure that street lighting in and of itself is going to change what either a pedestrian or the operator of a motor vehicle does as it relates to the rules of the road. I mean, obviously, street lighting can help the driver of a vehicle see a pedestrian, but this is really a complex problem. It's not just lighting, right? I mean, it's pedestrians being aware of their surroundings and making certain that if you're going to go out and you're going to walk, on the sidewalk or cross a street or, walk in a street, there are some areas of our community where there aren't sidewalks. And if you're forced to walk along the shoulder and you're going to do that at night, be sensible about it and wear clothing that's visible. Not every area of our community is well lit. The intersections in Bakersfield is a large part are well lit. A lot of that is due to the work of Mr. Smith and the Bakersfield City Council. But there are rural areas in our community, and I know your statistics take into consideration those more rural areas. Well, they're not well lit, all right? They're just not incorporated, and there isn't street lighting in those areas. So it's incumbent upon the pedestrian as well to make certain that they are doing those things to make themselves safe when they're out walking at night.
And every night accident isn't because of lighting either. There's probably more drunken driving at night. There's more impaired driving at night. There's other factors. I mean, last week in mid-morning, somebody got hit on Chester Avenue. Somebody right hooked them, in a crosswalk, walking across the street and got hit. So there are, as Matt mentioned earlier, many reasons, and lighting is one of them, but you're not going to be able to light up the streets like it's daytime.
And how does the city plan street lights and where they're put in terms of distance from one another?
Yeah, there's standards as far as lumens and, depending on whether you're on a arterial or a local street. There's different priorities, and generally people think that more lighting is safer, more for crime than for traffic, really. But there's also problems with too much lighting.
Is there a more efficient way we can light up our roadways at night?
Well, I'd say we're moving more towards solar lighting, which is much cheaper and easier to install and faster. And there's been problems in the past, but it's very difficult to go in and get PG&E and all the things you have to do for regular lighting, whereas solar you can just put down.
Yeah.
And Connor, if I may jump in, I know in a case that I investigated, this is a pedestrian that got hit on Niles. He was a known transient, and he suffered from mental health issues. And so a lot of these people, because we try to teach pedestrian education. I know that's part of what I do day to day. And this person wouldn't have known that was safe to do. It was in his mind to safely cross the roadway, and I think that was one of the factors.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump to that. I wanted to know, is this fatality problem also a drug problem, and how can we solve it?
I would say it's a combination of a lot of things, along with not just drugs, but alcohol, other prescription medications as well. I think we can't just narrow it down to one issue. It's a combination of different things.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, look, impairment of any form, whether it be on the driver's part or the pedestrian's part, is a contributing factor in some of these accidents, and we see that in our own cases. But then again, there's cases where there's no impairment at all, right? I would take into account the case that Mr. Smith was mentioning just last week on Chester. A woman in a crosswalk legally has the right of way, and she's just run over. And so there are instances where people are doing everything right. The pedestrian, at least, is doing everything right, and they still get hit. I personally was hit riding a bicycle, as you ride all the time, so you know what I'm talking about. I was hit coming back in town, middle of the day, bright clothing, on North Chester. Somebody just made a right turn in front of me and took me out. And so those things happen. You can be aware of your surroundings and be doing all the right things. But if the driver isn't following the rules of the road, there's a risk. And so, trying to narrow it down to this one thing. I know it'd be nice if we could simplify it and say it's this one issue. Let's solve this one issue and the problem is resolved. I just don't think it's that simple.
Yeah, just last year, I just have the numbers, 12,000 red light violations with our red light cameras. And we only have those like on 8 intersections. So again, people running red lights, driving fast, and problems happen.
If I can just jump in on that, red light violations are a huge problem in our community. I'm sure
Yeah.
the CHP sees that all the time. I know BPD is seeing that all the time. We see it in our cases. I personally observe it all the time, especially downtown. I don't know what it is about downtown, but people run the red lights through downtown as though they are in an armored vehicle. I don't understand the logic behind it. And so, you may want to bring this up in a different time, but enforcement is obviously a big component of this.
Yeah, I agree. I think the culture of the people that are behind the wheel is a big thing nowadays too. I'm more important than anybody. I got a place to go, and just the other day I stopped a lady she was in the number 1 lane on the 58 freeway going about 75, putting on makeup. So I think, again, it's a culture thing. I'm more important. I'm on my phone. I'm driving 10 miles over the speed limit. I don't care. I got somewhere to be.
Yeah. I think that the biggest question I think our viewers and most citizens are curious about is this with all the factors going into this problem, is this drivers and pedestrians being unsafe? Is this all homeless people or mental illness, people with mental illness?
Absolutely not. More than half of the accidents, fatalities, are just drivers. They don't involve pedestrians. I mean, you don't need a homeless person in order to have somebody killed in a car.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, to try to blame it all on homelessness or people on drugs or alcohol is just not accurate, right? It is an across-the-board problem. Speed, running red lights, driving distracted, and driving impaired are major components of this. That's not to suggest, Connor, that there aren't instances where the pedestrian is at fault. That definitely happens. And pedestrians need to follow the rules of the road as well, okay? But, driving too fast, running red lights, driving impaired, and driving distracted are major, major components. And if I can just echo one thing here, it's driving with a lack of respect for the other human beings around you that is really the key component of the problem.
Yeah. And I want to jump to the Smart Growth America study that was conducted in May of 2024. They examined a 5-year period of long-term fatality rates. Bakersfield ranked 4th most dangerous for pedestrians. And that same study also looked at the income of the areas where these accidents are happening. And I found that lower income areas have a far higher rate of pedestrian deaths. Why do we think that is when it comes to lower income areas and the safety of that roadway?
There's multiple reasons. Number one, they walk more. And number two, they probably have less improvements, less sidewalks, less infrastructure. That would be the two things I would point out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's entirely accurate. I mean, you just have less in the way of tax base. When you have less in the way of tax base, you just don't have the level of improvements. I mean, go look at the sidewalks in Beverly Hills versus the sidewalks in East Bakersfield, and you're going to see a difference. There's a difference in the tax base in those locations. So yeah, sure, that's a contributing factor. I don't know. Look, I'm not a fatalist, though. I think that we could still do better, even though we may be of less of an economic advantage than, say, Beverly Hills. It doesn't mean that we don't have room for improvement in our community. And
then moving on to another study, and we actually just did a story on this maybe a couple weeks ago, from the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety. It found that vehicles with a higher hood, wider body kill people more efficiently than lower, smaller kind of vehicles. How do these bigger cars cause pedestrian deaths easier?
Well, I read that study, and the factors, there's numerous factors, but one is you've got this blunt, flat front end, okay? And it's more likely to hit a pedestrian in a vital organ, their head, their chest, and their mid-body, and so it's more likely to cause fatal injuries just on impact. The other issue is it's more likely, as opposed to going up over the top of the vehicle like a lower vehicle would, it's more likely to throw the pedestrian or the cyclist straight to the ground where they end up with a head injury, and that can cause fatalities. And so just the design of the vehicle itself is more likely to cause injuries resulting in death. It's more difficult for drivers to see pedestrians directly in front of them than in a vehicle with a lower hood. And so all these factors kind of go together. Add to it that those particular vehicles you're talking about usually weigh a lot more than, say, a regular passenger car. So you've just got more mass involved in the collision with the pedestrian, which makes the accidents more severe.
And Officer Toro, in cases that you've seen, have, the ones with fatalities, have they been, more common with bigger cars?
I wouldn't pinpoint it just to a larger car because I know in a few that I've done, it's been a compact sedan, and it's been the sort of accident that you're describing where they get hit, they roll over onto the windshield, causing them to injure their head and, consequently hitting the roadway. So you got that fall to worry about as well. So I can't pinpoint it just because of it's a larger vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also speed, how fast. The momentum is how big a vehicle is and how fast it's going.
Mm-hmm. And, and speed is obviously a factor into all of these deaths as well. How is the speed of our roadway determined? And then also, how is it enforced?
Well, the speed of the roadway is determined by how fast people drive.
Mm-hmm.
You go out on a Tuesday morning when there's not very much traffic, and you do the survey, and how fast are 85% of the people going? And that's how the speed is set. And so if you've got a long, straight, wide road, people drive fast, and therefore it has a high speed limit. So you can't just go out and lower the speed limit and expect people to drive slower. You have to change the design of the street in order to encourage slower traffic.
And even I worked in Los Angeles for 4 years, right out of the academy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Arroyo Seco freeway, the 110.
Mm-hmm.
It's a curvy roadway, and part of that design was let's get people to slow down. Well, I don't know how many accidents I've had to respond to on that freeway. People get brave. Oh, let me try to hit this corner at a certain speed. So, I mean, you could change roadway design, but again, I think it's that culture. People just have no respect for our roadway laws.
Yeah.
Which gets back to enforcement, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I know the city has really stepped up as you brought in more in the way of motorcycle cops,
Right.
whose really the primary responsibility is enforce the rules of the road. And so that's, I think,
We
a
used to not have
major,
any. Now
yeah.
we have 16.
major change for our community, and one that I think will make things safer.
Yeah.
And we constantly have our saturation patrols. I mean, if you guys follow us on social media, we currently have our crash campaign that we got a grant to, and that's good until September of this year. And we've been going on doing saturation patrol in different parts of Kern County. And that's part of that is we tackle the primary crash factors, which is your speeding, distracted driving, no seat belts, and driving under the influence.
And I want to talk about the design, right? How does a design of a roadway affect the way we drive, walk, cycle around it, and the safety of how we do those things?
Well, as I mentioned, wide streets, that are straight and long, people drive fast. And also, when you don't have intersections, people will naturally jaywalk, pedestrians will. So, the more breaks in a road, the more crosswalks you have, the more opportunity for the pedestrian to cross at a safer place. And by changing the design of the road, you can slow down the traffic. But again, it's, people that don't have respect and they run through, it doesn't matter.
And we've seen it on Union Avenue and H Street, where we're kind of making these roads narrower. Have we seen, has this helped? Has this gotten better with those roadways?
Well, it's pretty early to tell. I mean, Union Avenue's only been finished a month or so, and so just at the last council meeting I requested, after a year, let's really look at the data and see what's going on.
And are there other ways to make roads safer that we haven't tried yet?
Well, roundabouts, the long term, Councilmember Besherdash mentioned that, cars are, they have radar now, and they help steer, and they will actually brake, and maybe 30 years from now, most cars will help protect pedestrians and protect vehicles more. So I think long term, that's an answer. Short term is, people need to pay attention.
Yeah, I would echo that comment completely. I mean, when it comes to long term, I remember doing a radio or TV show like this about a decade ago when this thing called Uber had just come out, right? And I thought, oh, that's it. Drunk driving's done. There'll never be another impaired driving case. You can just dial on your phone, you get a ride, it's $8, $10, $16 to take you home, and you're going to be safe. Well, that clearly has not solved our drunk driving problem. In fact, in our community, it still ranks as one of the biggest problems. I mean, I think we're averaging 4,000 DUI arrests per year in this community, so which is an embarrassing number, I'd point out. So the technology in and of itself didn't really solve the problem. I think that having respect for other people on the roads is really where this starts, and it's a two-way street. It's, as a pedestrian, you got to know you can't just cross in the middle of a roadway into traffic. As a person on a bicycle, you got to follow the rules of the road. Understand, you are a vehicle under the vehicle code when you're on a bicycle. And you've got to follow the same rules as if you're a motor vehicle. You've got to do that. And if you don't, you put yourself at risk. And so having respect and following the rules of the road, that is the easiest way to resolve the problem. I think doing things like narrowing the streets is a step in the right direction. But that in and of itself isn't going to solve it.
Mm-hmm. It's an everyone kind of issue, right? So it's not just, the city or lighting, or it's everyone kind of having to do their part, especially when you're behind a car or you're just walking.
Culture, yeah.
Yeah, culture. And I want to talk about the state that California legalized jaywalking, and I wondered if this is made this problem worse here in our community. Now that pedestrians have the right of way even outside of crosswalks.
I don't think it changed anything. I mean, people jaywalked before and people jaywalk now. It's just, it was an opportunity. The theory was opportunity for police to harass people that weren't breaking any other laws and, stop them and check them out. But as far as traffic safety, my opinion is it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, I don't know that it made any difference either. I mean, I would say this, and there's probably statistics to back this up, and I could be totally wrong, but I wouldn't imagine that we were writing a lot of jaywalking tickets in this community before the change in the law. So I just don't think it makes that big a difference.
I mean, I agree with Matt. And also, yes, it's legal, but you still got to do it safely. It doesn't give you every right to just dart out into the roadway outside of a crosswalk. You have to do it safely. You can't endanger yourself as a pedestrian, and you can't endanger a motor vehicle that's traveling on that roadway. They have the right of way.
It's like your mom taught you when you were young. You got to look both ways. Left, right, go left again, right? We all learned that as a child. I assume we're still teaching kids that. You need to do that. And you should do that even if you're in a crosswalk. Expect
Absolutely.
that vehicle is going to run that stop crosswalk or red light. And that makes it safer for you and the people around you.
I want to hit on hit and runs, and specifically to how they are investigated. We have seen hit and runs cases take months, possibly years, to be solved or for there to be a conviction. Why does this crime take such a long time? How is it investigated?
And so no case is the same, right? Every case is different. There's cases where, say for example, we may have a vehicle part that comes back to a certain car, but it's not going to give us the registered information. So we have really no leads to go off of. We're relying on witnesses, somebody to come forward. And a lot of these pedestrian hit and runs fatals happen out in rural areas where there is no cameras. Again, our investigators are, working with almost nothing. So we rely on the public. We rely on maybe a friend or family to come forward.
And specifically, in terms of being investigated, what happens at the scene, and kind of how is that? Is it the layout? Is it how does that take you through the story of kind of what goes on?
Yeah, so I mean, the scene, that is our crime scene, right? So we're going to shut down the street. We're going to take roadway measurements. We're going to look at vehicle damage. We're going to look at damage to the other person involved or the other vehicle involved. Of course, take photographs, and hopefully we have enough to where it'll lead us to the next step, which is finding a possible suspect.
And now we're going to see part of an interview I did with Bakersfield Ward 7 Councilmember Manpreet Kaur back in November. She talks about the design of city streets being a factor into this complex issue. She put it in a really well way, and I feel like we should take a listen, just get a reaction.
Bakersfield is one of the most dangerous cities for pedestrians and cyclists. And I can, from my city planning background, can share that this happens by design. And what I mean by saying that this happens by design is how our roadways are designed. A lot of what we're seeing right now in terms of how people get around, how they drive, how they walk, how they cycle, is because folks long before us designed the roads in a certain way and probably didn't anticipate that the city would grow as much as it did. They didn't realize that the city would grow to the extent that it did, as far and wide as it has. And so the same kind of model has been used within our city to keep designing roadways in the same way.
All right, so any reaction to that? What I'm really interested in is that we've been using a old way to design our roads, and if that has changed.
Traffic engineers don't want to change. I would say that, you know, in the big picture, designing roadways is relatively new science. You know, 100 years ago, you know, you didn't have freeways, you know, and then you build freeways and then you think, well, that freeway is pretty safe. Maybe we should build the local streets the same way. And so on freeways, it is safer to have wide lanes and to have some forgiveness. And so, but you do that on local streets and you encourage people to drive too fast in the neighborhoods, you know, on local arterials.
All right, any other thoughts, guys, on this?
I would just add that I have a very hard time believing that this is a problem unique to Bakersfield, right? Every community in the country had roads designed, you know, 80, 90, 100 years ago, and the communities have grown in ways that those original designers couldn't anticipate. So this is not a unique issue, all right? This is an issue that affects every community. And I do think the city is doing things to improve our roads. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but while the city is making those improvements that are going to take time to make, and it takes tax dollars to do it, we, as people living in our community, need to do things to make the problem better now. And that is, you know, actually give a hoot when you're behind the wheel, right? Pay attention, follow the rules of the road, look out for other folks that are around you. As a pedestrian, it's, again, following the rules of the road. If you're at night, if you're walking at night or riding a bike at night, wear clothes that are visible. You know the area. If you know that a particular roadway is dangerous, maybe pick a different roadway to get to and from wherever it is you're going, right? And so there's things that we can do now while the city is making efforts to improve our community, to make it safer for all of us.
Anything from you?
No, I agree on what Matt said. Part of what we teach through our education is, yes, most fatalities do happen at night. So if you got to plan a trip, do it during the day. Do it when it's safest to do so.
Yeah.
Plan ahead.
That's all I have for you guys. If there's anything else you'd like to add, I'd like to give the opportunity.
I just add one other thing. I think part of the culture is how we talk about it. You know, instead of a vehicle hit and killed a pedestrian, a driver hit and killed a pedestrian. So that when I'm a driver, I don't want to hit and kill somebody. But if it's a vehicle, it's a machine. It's just, you know, something out there that happened. Where it's really people on both sides.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, we've gotten to the point where we're numb to it, and I think one of the reasons we're numb is we talk about it in an impersonal way. And so, you know, making sure that we talk about it in a way where people understand that, you know, it was a person who took another person's life,
right,
I think makes a difference.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for coming in and talking about this very serious issue. I really appreciate it, and it's a very important issue in our county, and to really educate the public.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, Cohn.
Thank you.
Thank you.